All right. Well, again, thank you everyone for participating today. We're going to get started. I want to be mindful of everyone's time, particularly those three panelists who have so willingly offered some of their time today. So welcome and good afternoon. If you don't know me yet, my name is Will Cote. I'm the Parks Program Director for Parks and Trails New York. And on behalf of the entire Parks and Trails New York team, I want to thank you for joining us for the first webinar in a series designed to support grassroots friends groups through the sharing of best practices, innovative programming, and collaboration. The entire PTNY team is really excited to connect with you today and share this new initiative. We see so much value in highlighting the exemplary work that friends across the state have been doing this year, which, as you all know, has continuously been filled with surprises and unforeseen hurdles. Our hope is that you gain helpful insight and inspiration from today's phenomenal presenters and feel motivated by one another. The staff at PTNY is constantly impressed by the work you all do to enhance visitor experiences with our state's natural environment and cultural history, and we want to share that more broadly with all of you. First, I'd like to start with sharing what we have prepared for you tonight. First, I'm going to take just a few minutes to briefly touch upon PTNY's current work, as well as highlight some new initiatives that we have on the horizon. Like many of you, we have not slowed down since COVID arrived on our doorstep, but rather that we have been doubling down on our work to promote and protect New York's iconic outdoor recreational spaces. Then we will transition to our main presentation and welcome our three featured panelists. We are really fortunate to have these three speakers with us tonight, who will be allowed up to 10 minutes to share lessons they've learned in developing and executing virtual programming. We're excited to hear from Nancy Conway, the Education Program Director for the Friends of Five Rivers, a DEC education center in the Capital Region. Casey Chamberlin, the Manager of Programming and Development at the Hunters Point Park Conservancy, an organization that collaboratively supports Gantry Plaza State Park and the city-owned and operated Hunters Point South Park in New York City. And Caitlin Shea, the Event and Media Director at Walt Whitman Birthplace Association, a state park historic site in Long Island. These speakers will share their stories and insights into the exemplary programming they've done over the past year, discussing the educational and engaging programs they've carried out, but also how they were adapted to comply with health and safety guidelines, amongst other topics. And finally, we're going to allocate the remainder of our time to provide attendees an opportunity to ask the panelists questions at the end of the program. We also welcome you all to share something that you may have encountered or learned in your own efforts to create innovative programming during this challenging and pretty unusual time. Now, before I begin, I just want to review a few simple housekeeping points. As I mentioned, we strongly encourage you to share your questions and thoughts based on what is presented in this afternoon's program by adding them to the chat so we can address them later in the webinar during the question and answer portion of the agenda. You can find the chat feature in the center of the bottom panel on your screen. Additionally, if you are experiencing technical difficulties, we ask that you please address those in the chat as well. Our team will be monitoring the chat to assist you. If you cannot access the chat, please contact Erica Schneider. She's currently waving by email. Her info is on your screen and is also available on the PTNY website if you need it. And perhaps most importantly, we ask all participants remain muted in an effort to reduce background noise and foster an enjoyable experience for everyone. If you find yourself unable to locate the mute button, PTNY staff will be able to mute you on your behalf. Do not be alarmed if you find yourself unexpectedly muted during the presentations. And with that in mind, we welcome you to introduce yourselves in the chat. So let us know your name and your group affiliation. If you'd like to, we also encourage you to either share a win from this week, or since November is Indigenous Peoples Month, if you know what Indigenous land your park or historic site or natural land that you represent is currently on, we encourage you to share that as well. So again, please do keep yourself muted to do this, but feel free to participate in the conversation in the chat. So I would certainly be remiss if I did not thank the creative and dedicated PTNY team who has developed this afternoon's program. Specifically, I want to thank Haley Hamias as well as Erica Schneider, who have really championed this series, as well as Shayna Hogan, and of course, our executive director, Robin Dropkin. And I also want to remind everyone to stay involved with us. There are 2 more sessions of this webinar series this year. We will be joined by 3 more exceptional representatives of friends groups, as well as our development director, Lyndon Horvath, on Thursday, December 10th, to discuss fundraising and membership during COVID. That will be for this same time from 4 to 5 p.m. Then the following week on December 17th, we'll be hosting a discussion on engaging with your park community. And those presenters from Friends groups will be sharing compelling stories about working with park management, local elected officials, volunteer groups, and community organizations. And just for your ease, we are going to be adding the link to the registration for those upcoming sessions into the chat for you as well. And additionally, be sure to mark your calendar. Park Advocacy Day is slated for Monday, March 1st, 2021. With the looming budget shortfall as a backdrop, PTNY is already looking ahead to our next Advocacy Day. We have been in touch with our partners to think creatively about the best ways to express the importance of our needs. And if we want to protect our public lands and this crucial aspect of our public health infrastructure, we're going to need your help. So if you have a moment, please feel free to take that survey. That information will be sent to you in a follow-up to tonight's presentation. So now as we look ahead to 2021, and what that may hold for us as a community, it's essential that we reflect on the challenges and accomplishments we've experienced in the past year. In particular, the work that Friends groups have been doing. It's truly remarkable what the grassroots organizations in our state have been able to accomplish with sheer tenacity and ingenuity. And it is why we need to put a spotlight on some of those efforts today. It's not an overstatement at all to affirm that you played a key role in keeping parks and open space accessible by adopting and reinforcing new public health guidelines, and that adjusting to virtual and distance formats for your programming was a Herculean task. As an aside, the PTNY team has been joking that it seems like the catchphrase of 2021 is pivot. Everyone's saying, just got to pivot your programming. You know, take everything you planned, organized, and fine-tuned, and turn it completely upside down on its head. Circumstances demanded that folks create virtual programming, scramble to reorganize your fundraising and benefit campaign, or perhaps find a suitable replacement for a venue and event that was already set in stone. You had to seek new partnerships and collaborations in your community. Any way you slice it, we all had to be nimble. And on top of all of that, park visitation has increased. 2019, last year, we saw a record 77 million visitors. And from what we've heard from our partners, this year is setting a new benchmark. Our colleagues at the State Council of Parks has reported increases of 10 to 20% at locations, with some individual places seeing nearly 40% increase. For example, we have some friends from Walt Whitman presenting tonight. The Long Island region has seen an additional 4 million visitors this year as compared to 2019. All of that without the large annual events that many people in those communities come to expect. And Friends have stepped up to accommodate this influx and face those challenges that come along with that increase head on. But most importantly, many have used COVID and increased visitation as an opportunity, either to learn from or to capitalize on the circumstances. And I guess in some ways, it's the silver lining of the COVID pandemic, excuse me. They say that necessity is the mother of invention. Tough circumstances spawned creativity, and truly, Friends groups across the state were the epitome of imagination and resourcefulness. You were creative and you boldly adjusted, and that is why we want to highlight this afternoon. Eric Kulisade, who's the commissioner of the New York State Parks, said recently at one of our regional gatherings that this year has been unlike any other. We had to deal with situations that none of us would have chosen. And as we look ahead to the future, it's not clear where we're going, but we know that no matter what, our friends will be there to help us out and get us through. Thank you to all of our Friends groups for what you do for our parks. You are ambassadors. And because of you, our parks are more friendly, welcoming, and inviting for all. And we at PTNY wholeheartedly agree. So on behalf of the PTNY team and the tens of millions of visitors who sought refuge in parks, trails, historic sites, public lands, and natural spaces this summer, thank you for all that you do. And with that, let's get to the main event. That's why we're all here. So please help me in welcoming our first presenter, Nancy Conway from the Friends of Five Rivers.
Thank you, Will, and thank you to everyone at Parks and Trails New York for making this webinar possible. As Will just said, my name is Nancy Conway, and I am the Education Program Director for Friends of Five Rivers. We are located at DEC's Environmental Education Center in Del Mar, New York. Friends of Five Rivers offers a wide variety of hands-on outdoor experiential programming throughout the year. Our most popular programming, the Guided School Program, was in full swing in March when the shutdown occurred. We had to cancel visitation that was scheduled for 2,300 students, and there are more than 400 chaperones. And then we needed to get our heads together and rethink how to provide outdoor environmental on-site education at Five Rivers in a pandemic. Today, I've been asked to walk you through that process, how we revamped one of the 7 programs we are offering during the pandemic. That program is called Family Fun. There we go. Before I tell you how we deconstructed and then reconstructed Family Fun, I'd like to give you an overview of the program as it stood before the pandemic. This program is a theme-based interactive discovery program, and it is led by Friends of Five Rivers staff, volunteers, and instructors who are volunteers and interns at times. In addition, the program is designed for preschool-aged children, 2 to 5 years old, plus any younger siblings if necessary, and their adult partners. The goal of the program is to help these child-adult partners explore the environment safely, and then to share aloud their questions and their wondering. Family Fun programming is 1.5 hours per week, and there are 3 weeks per session. Each month, a new session is offered with new themes. So that's the Family Fun programming we had prior to the pandemic. Let's look at what we had to do to make that program available during the pandemic. We had a lot of pruning to do. And the first bit of pruning or cutting seemed very intuitive. It was to make our group smaller, small enough to feel safe heading outside together. The second bit of pruning took a much deeper cut into our programming. It required that we remove all of the indoor portion of the program. Now, I know I said it's an outdoor environmental education center, and it is, but for our youngest visitors, it's vital to do some pre-setting indoors in a warm, cozy space so that they are ready to head outdoors to explore the topic of the day. By removing the indoor portion, we had to take out all of that because it wasn't safe to have the children and the parents gather together physically and to share items such as books and puppets before heading out. With the pruning finished, Friends educators had to put our minds together to come up with how to take what remained in the program and move forward. So that is called grafting. So we took the rootstock of Family Fun and grafted it with COVID-19 guidelines. The first guideline, of course, was to have smaller groups, which meant that we needed to find additional naturalist instructors willing to guide during a pandemic. The second bit of grafting had to do with continuing the cooperative nature and modeling of cooperation for these youngest environmentalists. So we created novel extension activities for families to take home with them and do with the child-parent partnership or other siblings, neighbors, friends, etc. It's a key part to the program. The third grafting piece was we needed to pre-package each and every bit of material we would be handing out, whether it was those extension activities or materials we used on site during the lesson. Think about hand lenses, for example. And then the fourth bit of grafting was the longest and toughest. It was looking at local, state, and federal guidelines and identifying how to implement them on site at Five Rivers. Once we did the identification, we needed to write the process, work through the kinks, and then communicate it to everyone on site, as well as the registrants for the Family Fund program. With grafting and pruning complete, the question is, how is it going? And it's going really well. Both parent feedback and a wait list tell us this. While a wait list is fantastic during a pandemic, it really warms our hearts to hear back from parents about their experiences. So I'd like to give you the opportunity to read some feedback from a parent who had just finished our October session of Family Fun. Feedback like this fuels Friends of Five Rivers to continue to prune and graft and read those guidelines and rework our programming, because we know at a time like this, when indoor activities and events have been halted, there's a real possibility for outdoor environmental education to bubble up to the forefront and to stay there in people's lives. Of course, none of this is possible without getting your whole team on board. And we had a lot to learn in that area, not because we don't communicate every single day with our teammates, but rather because additional teammates became so important, specifically our cleaning crew. To offer an outdoor environmental education program at Five Rivers, it was key to have bathrooms that were clean and would be re-cleaned while participants were on site. So we needed to get together our entire team and help them to understand that our goal was to hold on-site, outdoor, in-person environmental education. And thankfully, we have a great team at Five Rivers, and they were behind us all the way. Once you have the team together, the next lesson that we needed to learn was that just because people are supporting you doesn't mean that they are available on site when you need them available. With everyone working in so many different realms, we really needed to take a look at who was on site physically and able to get out there and guide during a pandemic. That's something we've never had to consider before because we always have lots of willing instructors. A third lesson that we had to take a serious look at was how much money we needed to put towards PPE. Of course, this was not budgeted in our 2020 fiscal year, but it was absolutely necessary. From gloves to hand sanitizers to masks, all of that was needed for our volunteers and our staff to feel safe while guiding. The fourth lesson we'd like to share with you is that not only are the guidelines mandatory, but it's really, really necessary for you to put time aside to create your own safety protocols for your site. You need to look at each participant's each participant's point of view in terms of safety. How is your visitor looking at this experience? How is your cleaning crew, your maintenance team, your DEC partners, your volunteers, and your own friends staff? Then once you've figured out all those viewpoints, and this is the hard part, pull it together into a simple, common safety protocol plan. It takes time to do that, but I can tell you that that is one of the most important things that we did during the first 2 months of the shutdown. The other really important thing is to allot more time for all sorts of parts of your programming, from your preparations, in our case, all the pre-packaging, to the cleaning of equipment that you used on site, and the cleaning of the rooms you used in terms of preparation, and the cleaning of the bathrooms. And finally, a lot extra time for that communication we talked about in lesson 1. Specifically, extra time for the debriefing of anyone who was out with the public providing the lesson. These people are going to be are going to contain your ability to keep a pulse on what's going on out there. So for instance, do we gently need to send an email that states all masks must be worn over nose and mouth for the entirety of the program? Or during the debrief, you might learn that one of your instructors is sounding fatigued, and perhaps it's time to call in a backup. So with all those lessons learned, the most important thing Friends of Five Rivers would like to say today is keep going. Keep going, try new things, experiment. People are willing to come along with you. And if you need help, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, or the web. You can even call us. We've put our phone number there. Thank you very much for listening, and we wish you all the best in getting through the pandemic with your programming. Now I'd like to introduce Casey Chamberlin from Hunters Point Parks Conservancy.
All right. Thank you, Nancy. That was excellent. I'd also like to thank the PTNY team for putting this all together and having me speak. We have a great turnout. It looks like 45 people here, so that's awesome to see. Hopefully you learned something from all of the presenters. So I'm Casey Chamberlin with the Hunters Point Parks Conservancy. My title is Manager of Programming and Development, but I am the one and only full-time staff member of the organization, and I work with a very dedicated 10-member board of directors who help do a lot of the implementation work as well as the governance of our organization. So next slide, please. As just a really quick background, our organization actually started in 1998 as Friends of Gantry Plaza State Park. So Gantry Plaza State Park is a New York State park that's that's located in the borough of Queens in New York City, right on the East River. It's one of actually only 8 New York State parks that are in the New York City region. And so our group was founded that long ago, right after the park opened, and operated as a friends group for a very long time. However, in 2013, the end of 2013, another park opened just south of Gantry Plaza State Park. So if you see the map here, you can see this park is called Hunters Point South Park. It's operated and maintained by the New York City Parks Department. However, when you're there, it's a kind of a cohesive park. It really feels like one. So at that time, our organization decided to take this new park under our wing as well. And we became the Hunters Point Parks Conservancy in 2014. Although we're still legally Friends of Gantry Plaza State Park, and we have a very strong affinity for the State Parks Department and the Parks and Trails New York community. And so our 2 main things that we do as an organization are volunteer projects and free community events. We do lots of other things as well, but those are kind of our 2 programmatic pillars. And obviously both of those had to be, were significantly disrupted with COVID this year. So I'm going to talk you through what we did for both of those programs. You can move on to the next slide. So one of the big things we do, like I said, is volunteer programs, and we've kind of operated the same way for several years, where we had like a standing schedule every other Saturday morning. We would have anyone in the community could come out. It was an open invitation as per pre-registration, but the numbers really didn't matter. We could have anywhere from 20 to 45 on a Saturday morning. And typically those people would pull weeds, or sometimes we'd have mulching or planting projects, and we work with the state on those. So when we heard about what's happening in March, we just kind of put it all on hold because we knew we couldn't have those kind of numbers in one place at a time. And so we just waited to see what would happen. And by the time it got a little later in the spring and we realized that this was going to be something we were in for the long haul, and noticed that the park still definitely needed our help, we decided we needed to do something. So we worked directly with our park manager and our New York City regional director to figure out like what would be possible in terms of how we could bring volunteers back into the park. So after some back and forth to kind of figure out, making sure the safety protocols were in place, we decided that we could feasibly run small group volunteer days 3 days a week rather than a big one, twice a month. We decided to do small groups 3 days a week. So starting in June, we actually were working at Gantry Plaza State Park every Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday morning, 10 people maximum at a time. And we opened this up to pre-registration to make sure that we always had those numbers and didn't have more than 10 at any one time. We had a great response right away. This was kind of the peak of when people, beautiful weather, people using the parks anyways, and they really wanted to get out and help out. So we always hit our number on Saturdays. We always filled up. The weekdays is a little tougher sometimes because of people's schedules, but we averaged around 7 people per day for those volunteer sessions. So through June and through July, actually, we did 3 days a week, every morning, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday morning in Gantry Plaza State Park. And it was great because we had some support from the state parks team as well. They typically had 2 staff members there as well that were helping guide our volunteers and tasks. And then once it hit August, we started to branch out and work with the city park as well that I mentioned, Hunters Point South. And then at that time, we shifted our schedule to do every Thursday in Hunters Point South and every Saturday in Gantry. And we worked that way all the way through the end of October. Actually, the first weekend of November was our last day. And in total, we actually ended up doing 50 volunteer days this year, which is significantly more than we've ever done in past years. And although our total attendance numbers were lower, we 487 this year versus over 1,000 last year, we actually got more work done. The volunteers removed 856 bags of weeds versus about 600 last year, planted 1,200 plants and 13,000 bulbs. I think it was, multiple reasons, but I think the fact that we were attracting like the people who really wanted to be there and really wanted to work, and they did a great job. We had people who've come out over 20 times this season, which is remarkable. And so now we're figuring out how to thank those people for all their hard work. And I don't have a ton of time, so I want to get into it now, but we actually ended the season with what we call the LIC Bulb Fest, where we actually had 70 people in one day help plant 13,000 bulbs. So that was a significant event that took a lot of planning. So if anyone has more questions about how to do an event like that, happy to answer them later or separately. You can go to the next slide. So the precautions and the protocols that we came up with were really, what we tried to do, we really didn't try to reinvent the wheel here. We basically were listening to those in authority figures. So we worked directly with the state parks to see what they thought was the best way to go about things, and followed CDC recommendations from our city and state government. And we kept it fairly simple, and so that we didn't have to do anything that was, an overwhelming amount of work on our end. So we kept it, like I said, pretty simple, where it was 10 people maximum, and that included our team and the state parks team. So we actually only opened up 7 volunteer slots per day because I was there, or another board member, and then 2 from the New York State Parks team. In addition, we required people to wear masks the entire time they were volunteering with us. We gave them either a newly purchased pair of gloves or a recently cleaned pair of gloves. And we typically did no tools sharing. We basically didn't use tools. We mostly just did hand weeding, just to eliminate that additional point of shared contact. We were really fortunate that our board president, Rob Bash, he's actually on this call, and he's on the Parks and Trails New York board as well, was willing to take all the gloves and vests back to his apartment and wash them. So that was a really, really, really helpful part to make sure that, again, people felt safe and that we were being safe. The main thing that we did on these parts, on the protocol section that I think was important, is that we made sure that when people signed up for a shift, that all of these were right up there on the webpage. Like, this is what you need to do when you volunteer with us. And we also reminded them again in an email from myself, either a day or 2 before the shift, and then in person. So everyone had that extra layer of understanding the protocols, and then also that safe. They probably felt that safer that way as well. Okay, next slide. So that's our volunteer program. These are some shots from us in Gantry Plaza State Park this year. Some of our great volunteers who did a lot of excellent work. Next slide. And the next thing I want to talk about is our fitness program. I'll try to run through this quickly. Our virtual program. Like I said, we do a lot of free events in the park. We do some big ones like movies and concerts that definitely wouldn't have really translated well to a virtual screen. But we also have a fitness program, a kids program, and an art program that we figured might work well on virtual. And so we decided to just go for it. In June, we kicked off our fitness program where we were doing 4 classes a week. So we had a Zumba, Pilates, yoga, and bar once per week for 12 straight weeks. And then in July, we kicked off a kids program where we had 1 kids program per day, Monday through Friday for 6 weeks. And for those, we essentially mirrored the schedule of like what we were going to do in the park, and we put it online. So we had a schedule plan. We planned our schedule really early in advance. And so we just took those instructors and those programs that we were going to do in the park, said, hey, let's try it virtually. And it was really well received and very successful, where we then decided we would also transfer our art program online as well. So actually today at 3 o'clock was our last virtual event of the year, and it was our 100th right on the dot. And we reached over 3,000 attendees for those 3 programs that we were really happy with. I guess you can go to the next one. What really helped us make this possible and successful is one I mentioned is we've had a history of working with all of these instructors in the past, and they were already kind of set up to do something with us in the park and really gung-ho and willing to try something virtually. I loved how Nancy ended her slide with just keep going and keep trying, because that was kind of our attitude is we don't know if this is going to work. Frankly, we don't think it's going to work, but let's try it and let's see what happens. And it helped that these were instructors that our people knew, that our audience knew, our neighborhood knew, and they have their own audiences and networks as well. So we were able to attract people and keep bringing people back. In addition, we also were fortunate enough to have sponsors for these programs who were lined up in advance, who were willing to again, try and provide the funding for a virtual program and see what happened. We throughout tried to collect as much data and feedback as possible. So every program we sent a post-event survey to see what people thought about it. And, what did you like? What did you not like? Is this something we should change? Throughout as it went, most people were just really happy that we were offering something and didn't have any substantial feedback for things to change. So we just kind of kept rolling with it and kept it going. We also were fortunate enough to have a part-time staff member who ran all of these events in terms of the logistics. So collecting the sign-in, sending out the link in advance, and being on the chat or being on the event itself to mute people or answer questions, things like that. And then throughout, requiring the pre-registration also really helped us track our numbers and our attendees so that we were able to communicate with them in addition before and after. Next slide. So that's all I have. I think it ended up being, again, we didn't really know what to expect this year, and we were pleasantly surprised with the results. We hope that we don't have to continue with virtual events next year, but at this point, I think we're teed up that if we have to do it, we can, and we're gonna push through and keep going. You can follow us at hunterspointparks.org, or our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter feeds are right there. And you're also welcome to reach out to me directly, casey@hunterspointparks.org. If you have any questions about these programs, and we'll be answering questions at the end as well. And that's all I have. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Cynthia Shore from the Walt Whitman Birthplace Association.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you, PTNY, for having this wonderful time to get together and connect and share. I have our event director is here, and she's going to talk about our virtual programs, but I want to talk very briefly about, we closed in March like everyone, and we opened in August for tours and the office workers. The staff decided to stay home. We're not having any events on site, and that was fine. We do have a tour of the birthplace, and we had a new revised tour. They come in the front door, they go out the back door. We have fans blowing fresh air, and I went and bought 2 UV lights that I circulate around the site, one in the birthplace and one in our office areas on a rotating basis to keep it healthy. Like all of you, we wear masks. We're following all the PPE guidelines. And we're coming along smoothly here. I come into the office, and what is nice is we do have the tour guides who feel comfortable coming in, and our curator is coming in, and we even have interns from college who wanted to come back. So those are people that feel comfortable wearing masks, follow all the guidelines. We're getting a lot done with our curatorial department. So this is a big plus, kind of a silver lining, that we can concentrate on that and grow that and do the things we need to do for our collections department. In the meantime, I'll turn this over to Caitlin, and she'll be talking about all our programs. She has done a wonderful job training herself and using her skills to manage the Zooms, and also have innovative programming on her own, reaching out to Facebook and doing all kinds of outreach, which she's going to talk about. So thank you again, and I'd like to introduce our event and media director, Caitlin Shea.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, and thank you, PTNY, for this really amazing program. It's a really interesting look in depth of what parks are doing right now. So as Cynthia was saying, we unfortunately had to close in March, but we started to think about experimenting with virtual events. We didn't know how it would go. I think I'm also echoing the other speakers that we heard from earlier. You know, it is a very creative endeavor. So we started with Facebook Live, actually, and we had a workshop with our Long Island Poet of the Year. And the workshop went really well. However, we noticed that it didn't feel like an interactive experience. And we were really craving something that let people interact with the poet and learn more and ask questions on video. So we ended up trying Zoom. And again, it was very experimental. Will anyone show up to these events? And we found out overwhelmingly, yes, people will pre-register. They'll go through all those steps to come to these events, and they'll stay longer because they chose to come to this event. They already signed up. I should also mention that we receive their email addresses when they sign up that way, whereas with Facebook, people are sort of coming and going as they please. There's no way of tracking. So this has been a major boost for us. I should also say that in person, we would have 1 to 2 events, usually poets or historic scholars joining us per month. So 1 to 2, and we went to 1 per week from March until present. So that was a major boost. And you'll see here in the top left, we have local poet and social worker Terry Muse, and she was one of our first poets to present. And we asked her to volunteer, and we actually have had all of the poets that have joined us, which is over 60 actually up till now. And they've always volunteered. None of them had said no up to this point. So that's really amazing. And we make it a great experience for them. We want it to be mutually beneficial. To see she's showing her book here. So that's really important to also promote the person who's presenting and make sure that everything they want shared is shared. In the lower left here, we have Artistic Director of the Acting Center in New York City, Karen Demaro. And she had presented in person with techniques of how to perform poetry with us for a few years. And when we asked her to do the Zoom event, she very willingly accepted, and she actually formatted it for how to perform poetry on Zoom, which is really useful for poets. You know, it's a whole different environment. They're working from home. And you'll see there in her hand on the left, she has this little piece of paper that has a hole in it and 2 eyes. And that was her recommendation, was to put that over your camera with just your camera peeking out. And so you remember to look up at your audience instead of just looking down at your book when you're presenting on Zoom. And also she said, use hand gestures and, you know, be engaging just like you would in person. And then you'll see also some of our advertising for other events down at the bottom left. And Zoom itself has really taken off with what's been going on, where everybody needs to connect at home. So instead of just virtual events, it really became Zoom events because people are so comfortable with having the app already on their phone and things like that. All right, next slide, please. Okay, and then I love this slide because it really illustrates what happens when you have poets inside their home presenting, as opposed to on a stage where, you know, they are just presenting their poetry. They're in this environment that's very comfortable for them. And in the top left there, you'll see our 2020 poet in residence, Juan Felipe Herrera. And he's an internationally known poet that we had invited to join us, but of course he couldn't. And again, it becomes, what is a poet in residence if they can't be in residence with us this year? But we were so thankful that he agreed to have a virtual workshop and poetry reading with us. And we were actually able to sell tickets to that. So here he's holding up his new poem, Social Distancing. And he showed the audience that he actually drew this poem with charcoal on a large piece of paper. So when people read it, it's a different experience than how he's creating it. And again, that wouldn't happen necessarily on a stage. You wouldn't have all those things with you. To the right, you'll see local poet and Emmy-winning lyricist for Sesame Street, Maggie Bloomfield. She's a local poet. And she actually has a poem about what Elmo and Grover would think of her poetry. So she had those puppets right on hand there and she just picked them up. So it was just another magical moment there. And then we had Poet Laureate of San Antonio, Texas, Octavio Quintanilla joining us. And his current project, Front Texto, combines poetry and artwork. So he's able to show us the artwork that corresponded with all of the poems during the event. All right, next slide, please. And the one lesson that we did learn the hard way, unfortunately, is music does not come through well on Zoom. So it does come through really well when there's just one person singing and one instrument being played, but anything beyond that, unfortunately, just sounds like a mess when it comes through. So you'll see in the top left there, we have a spoken word poet, and behind her is her husband playing guitar. And that came through beautifully. But we already had in advance set up a program that was going to be these 3 performers down here on the bottom left. And they wanted to play classical music that's inspired by poetry. However, that music wouldn't come through well. So we problem solved and we had them pre-record each song, which they did very lovingly, very quickly before the event. And then they were able to offer commentary about each song in between. So they play the video, then they would speak a little bit. And we've also had a lot of virtual poetry open mics that include music, and you see that down at the bottom right. Josie Bello is a local singer-songwriter, and that was our Halloween event. So she has her witch's hat and pumpkin there. All right, next slide, please. And then it's not just poets and not just music, but also history that we want to feature. And that's also part of our regular programming as well. So one of our most adventurous by far programs has been 2 programs actually with PhD candidate Andrew Rimby. And he brought us up to the top of Janes Hill, which is the highest point on Long Island. He brought us on a hike up there virtually, live on Zoom. And again, it's this creative experience. It's also taking a leap of faith. I remember I was preparing what I would say if he got disconnected on his way up there. I was thinking, you know, well, we'll ask people where they're from and we'll try to get some momentum going. So, but luckily he only disconnected like once for like a few seconds. So it wasn't too bad. And again, we thought that that went so well. We got so many visitors, especially international visitors for programs like this, that we did it again and we had it be a tour of Huntington Village, which is right near us. And that went really well. That was also about Whitman and his history throughout the town, as opposed to today, what it looks like. And these were inspired by New York State Path Through History weekends, where they often have tours of historical sites for free. And so we have $5 suggested donation for all of our events, and we've seen our donations grow a lot. And we ask for them just during our events. We mention it, and we thank everyone who has been donating, because it has been an amazing experience, and we feel closer with our members, with our audience than we ever have before, which has been a really unique way of connecting with them, where they feel like they know us. We have this warm, welcoming event each week. And we have so many new followers just on our social media. And as I was saying earlier, by posting these videos on YouTube, we're putting this work into these events, but they also have a lasting presence online. So people are still finding us through those YouTube videos, and then they may join us later and find our social media. So it really is growing our presence in such a big way. And then sometimes we have people posting in the chat that they just found out about us in somewhere like Spain the other day. Then we also have people joining us from their cars sometimes. So it is, you know, a valuable thing for people, a very uplifting experience. And so I just want to mention also, if you'd like to visit our social media to learn more about these events and how we're sort of putting them together. A lot of keywords in there. There's a lot of stuff you could use us as a cheat sheet for ideas if you like. And we hope that you'll join us. Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you to our presenters. I've learned quite a bit. I was actually jotting some notes down for myself. It certainly got some of the creative juices flowing, I guess, for lack of a better term. And we really appreciate your insights. You know, I hope that the participants who have been with us here this afternoon have also gotten a few tidbits of wisdom from you as well. And I don't want to waste too much time. I want to jump right into questions. I've actually been getting a lot of questions directly, so hopefully your question will also be answered. Appreciate that. One question that I've had from a couple of folks, and I guess this is a great segue to start a Q&A, is for any of our panelists, you know, what would be just like the one key piece of advice that you have for groups who currently don't have any virtual programming or maybe a little bit nervous to get started? It can be a lot of an undertaking, obviously. So what's that one, you know, nugget of information that you want folks to take away?
I can start if you want. I would say, you know, we all mention this, like, try things, it's worth trying. But I would say also, if before that, one thing that we made sure to do before we start anything is ask and like understand your audience and see if it's something they want. So it might, you know, this isn't for everyone, I would say. You know, first thing is to probably look at your constituent base and your audience and understand whether or not you think they would want something, but then also ask them. You know, we actually did a survey to our newsletter list and said, is this, like, if we did this, would you join? And it didn't get a ton of responses, but of the responses, I think, you know, 90% said yes, we would want some virtual programming. So that was kind of like the first inspiration to get us moving in the first place. So, but it's, you know, again, it's not for everybody. And so what works here might not work for you. So no, like, analyze your programs, analyze your audience, and then make your decisions from there.
I would have to say, for the Friends of Five Rivers, we are an experiential outdoor programming place, so it is tricky to go online. What we did have success with, however, was podcasts on different topics regarding nature, and those were really well received. When we tried to do videoing, we recognized very quickly that our equipment that we own is not good enough to do that. And that was a learning process. If I had to put one word to programming in a pandemic, it is remain flexible. You need to try things and fall down and get back up. And the public is being so gracious and accepting of all the things we're trying, because they fully recognize this is a whole brave new world, and they're willing to walk with you in it. So just keep trying.
Yes, and I would echo that with Nancy. Just keep trying, see what works. I would also say, just take what you do already, what you do best, and find interesting ways of using that content. Another example of a great program we had was, there was a book in our gift shop, and the author was friends with us on Instagram. It's called Drawing with Whitman, and the author is Kristen McLaughlin. And we asked her, would you like to do a Zoom event with us, because it's a popular children's book? And she said yes. So it's fun to find those other angles too. It doesn't have to be, you know, we always have poets, but there can be other unique ways of finding programming. And as Casey was saying, yes, definitely ask your audience. We've been receiving more feedback than ever, which is a really great way of learning more about what people want. And people are more willing to share right now because they're home for the most part and they want to be heard.
Thank you for the advice. I think it's good to reiterate, to be flexible and try to know your audience a bit. One question, I guess, as a follow-up to that, I've actually had this question from Richard, Heidi Marie, as well as folks from Grant Cottage. You know, what does your average attendance look like for virtual programming versus the programs that you traditionally did maybe in person? Are you seeing something similar? Is it less? I guess people would assume that, or maybe is it more? Or I don't know who wants to field that first. Maybe Nancy's nodding. So Nancy, do you want to try first?
Okay, so for family fun, we have actually increased numbers. And in order to do that, we had to bring on more naturalist instructors because we really needed to keep small groups. The other thing we did was add another day to the programming in the week. That has really helped. For all of our programming, except the guided school program, which is dependent on school groups, we have seen increases. One of our adult programs called Talk and Track has doubled. And again, we've had to bring on more staff to head out with those folks. The only program that we threw out there that didn't stick was an online educational program. And I believe that's just because what we do best is outdoor environmental education, and that's what people think of us as. So we're going to keep doing that.
I would say that we've had an astronomical bigger audience overall. We might get as many as 30 people in person for an event, but when it went virtual, we'd get 50, 60 people. And again, that international presence is amazing. There's people that are interested in Whitman in other countries, and now we're reaching them instead of just being one static location. And that's just been amazing, communicating with these people. Also, a lot of them do become donators, even though they may never visit the site in person. So that's been a really wonderful way of growing. We're located across the street from Walt Whitman Mall. So we're on the other side though, so people have to kind of come find us. So we've been working on, also growing our presence locally, but especially now it's just virtually so many people are contacting us on a regular basis. It's amazing.
So we actually saw a significant drop off in the numbers of attendance for our events. And a lot of that I think is because we get a lot of people who just walk up to our events and see them and they stumbled upon them. And they know, then because we live in our park is a fairly transient neighborhood. There's a lot of new families who move in and move out. And so there's new people discovering our park and our organization all the time. For some of our classes, like fitness classes, it was kind of similar. We got like an average of 30 every time, but we would occasionally, in past years have an event such as like a movie night where we could get 1,000 people there in one night. And a lot of that is just because if it's a beautiful day, people walk up and they see a movie and they sit down and they do it. So for our virtual stuff, we kind of just relied on the same sort of people who already knew us or already knew our instructors and were regulars and come back. And we didn't have as much of a success of bringing in new people through it as some others, but I think that's just because it's not the unique appeal of a Walt Whitman type poetry event. Or, we're just doing kind of standard basic stuff. And so we relied more heavily on our already existing audience for these rather than grow it.
That actually, so many segues to choose from, and the PTNY team is laughing because I use that word all the time. Caitlin, you've mentioned something a couple of times, and I think Casey and Nancy, you can speak to it too, but have you found there to be a way to capitalize on folks who may be attending programming for the first time, transitioning to other roles as like donors, members, basically using virtual programming to support your bottom line? Have you found that it's a great way to do that? And if so, how have you done it? Just by follow-up emails or individually reaching out? Just kind of tell us how that's going. I know it's an issue for a lot of groups right now.
Looks like she's muted.
Hey, I can see Haley's on it. There we go.
Thank you, Haley. I muted myself. I didn't know I could unmute. Absolutely, yes, it has transformed. Also with ease of donation, I think that's an important part of it. We actually made it so that on Facebook, we could put a donate button. So we're showing them all these great things we are doing. and in a way that they can enjoy it at home. And then on top of that, right while they're watching it, they can donate. And again, even the smallest donations add up over time. And you have to remember that for most people, it's sort of a split-second decision. You have their attention quickly, and then you want to make sure it's really easy for them to donate after that. And then during our events, we share donation links, and people definitely donate during that. And then we send a follow-up email just in case. And also when they pre-register. And we give them, you know, updates about the future events and things like that so that they sort of stay with us. We want this to be our audience that is continuing to join us again and again.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you. I know, again, as I mentioned, a lot of groups are thinking about their financial situation and how this could possibly translate into donors, essentially. As a spoiler, the next webinar that Haley and Erica put together is on that particular issue. So if you want to know a little bit more about that, hopefully those panelists can provide some insight. I know we're getting close to 5. I do have 2 more questions I definitely want to ask. One is about social media promotion. The other is really about the future of virtual programming. So as a teaser, hopefully I can keep folks with us and buy a few more minutes. But getting to that question about social media, or really promotion, I guess, in general, seems like a lot of you are using social media. Have you found a particular platform that you feel like you were surprised is working really well? Or is it the tried and true e-blasts via email and Facebook? Or is it a mishmash of whatever? I think some folks are just hesitant to maybe try something different. So any insights that you all have about that would be great.
I'd say for us, our best response, especially for promotion of these events, was just through our email newsletter. We put together a sort of social media promotion schedule for our programs and push things out irregularly. We actually found that our responses on Facebook were lower this year. I don't know why that is. I found, like, just in general, our interactions on Facebook have gone down. And then we have a really good Instagram presence, but we kind of try to segment our messaging a little bit. So we don't really use the Instagram feed as event promotion. It's more just like beautiful photos. And so we'll use the stories to do promotion there. The other thing that we definitely stressed this year, as I mentioned, we partner with other organizations to do the event promotion, or to do the events. So we basically insisted that they promote on their platforms as well. So I think people found them also, but for us, at least, just like our email newsletter, I think was where we got the best response rate.
For friends, the same. We have an email blast that goes out. And we also have the wonderful support of our DEC partners who have a listserv that goes out as well. We have a Facebook presence and an Instagram account. But actually, just during one of my programs this week, one of the participants suggested that we also try Meetup. I don't know if any of you have tried Meetup, but the description was much more a proactive way of bringing people to our events than Facebook, for say, because in Meetup, once you identify what you're interested in, anytime something is posted in that arena, you're sent the information. So that's a platform we're going to be looking into.
That sounds interesting. Meetup. I haven't looked into that yet. But we have the same. We have an email blast. For these events, though, we talk about them a week before, along with an email. Again, because we're having an event every week. So we really have to juggle this and be talking about this week, but also next week. But we also send a reminder the day of, and I think that that is vital. We'll have maybe 10 people signed up the night before. And of course, as the event director, I'm nervous. And then the next day we'll have 70 people, and it's kind of this shock. But people don't plan to go to virtual events, is what I've learned throughout this. They, think that's nice, and they like it on Facebook, and then they just sort of forget it's even happening. So you have to sort of be that person who's constantly reminding them. And then on social media, absolutely, our Instagram has grown a lot. it was originally our Facebook that had the most followers, and it still is, but having just beautiful pictures and pictures of people, of course, keywords too. I mean, as we plan these events, I start to see them in keywords, it's just sort of a hashtags. And of course, I also think that our social media has grown in a lot of the time, the older posts are about Whitman's relationship to Huntington, where we're located in particular. But because we have this international audience, it's interesting to talk about broader topics that everyone can relate to. Whitman is known as the poet of democracy. So something like that, so many countries are interested in and they want to hear more. He also was a nurse during the Civil War. That story people really want to hear more about. So it's, again, just taking our content and thinking about, maybe you'll never visit our site, but what could you take from this as a whole? And again, I think that does lead to donors. I think that people think, oh, I might never have anything physically to do with this place, but I love what they're doing and I want to learn more about them and support them.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I will point out, I think it's Nancy Dwyer from Moreau said a meetup does have fees. So hi, Nancy, thank you. Which, just obviously everyone gets their cut regardless of whatever fundraising mechanism you're using. But, I think you were all making a point. I think Caitlin, you really put, a fine point on it that there's so much content out in the world now because people are home. You really have to hustle for every single registration and make sure that you don't get lost in the mix. And I know it's something that PT&Y we've been working on and is a struggle. So thank you for your insights and hopefully that helped. I know we're 3 minutes over. One more question, I promise. And I think this is actually perhaps the most important. I mean, we're all looking for the end of COVID and these restrictions and all of that. And I think the question that's sort of out there is, panelists, so what do you feel like is the future of virtual programming for your site, for your education center, for your park? Is virtual programming a viable function in the future, or do you feel like it will fizzle out when COVID kind of eventually leaves? Are you going to keep it in your portfolio of programming, I guess?
That's the big question. That's what our December and January board meetings are going to be about. But it's something we definitely have already thrown around, right? Because it's been a problem in at least for our park. I'm sure something similar is, you have a limited window of programming. We pretty much do our events from May through October, and then that's it. And then we've thought about trying to do winter programming, fall stuff, but it's so weather dependent. It's so tricky. We do like a tree lighting, and that's like pretty much the only winter event we've ever done. And so there is this real possibility of moving that programming online and sort of chunking up our programming into different seasons and doing, a winter virtual, a summer in person, and then another virtual at the end of the year. I think this has been the year of we'll see. And so I think that's where we are now, but I don't think that, I think it's a very reasonable thing to consider that this is probably not going to go away fully. There will be virtual programming that will spawn out of this, that will continue. Whether or not that's where our resources are best put is what we need to figure out first. I think a lot of it comes, down to, thinking strategically and thinking about your budget and is this the right place to put your money? So that's where we're going to start with and then move forward from there. But, check back next year and see if we're still doing it.
We've done some programming for 2021, and I've set up the presenters and speakers to be either or. So since we don't know what 2021 will be, I have people lined up in one series to do either Zoom or come in person. So one's coming from California. So we've settled that beforehand that we both understand that we have to take that into account. I don't know, Caitlin, if you wanted to speak to something else.
Well, just to add on that, we also have been talking a lot about hybrid events, and that would be a really interesting way. I just picture being there and trying to type to our online audience while monitoring. So we're going to have to really streamline something like that. We are lucky to have a lot of volunteers, so I'm sure they could help this process along, whatever that would look like. But yeah, that would probably be our future.
And for us, it's environmental education. And as all educators know, humans retain 10% of what they hear and 90% of what they actually do. So hands-on definitely is our niche. However, never say never, right? We don't know how it's going to go. And right now, I have some ideas for what we'll be doing in the winter, which will combine both an online portion and an in-person scheduled visit. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, actually, again, word of PTNR's word of the year, segue. That's a great segue. I think it's a perfect way to encapsulate sort of the end of this Q&A, which is never say never. We'll see how it goes, and as all of our presenters have said, stay nimble and be flexible and be willing to try ultimately. And Casey, Caitlin, and Nancy, thank you so much for sharing your insight today. Thank you to all of our participants for taking a little bit of time to spend with us this afternoon. I certainly learned something, and I hope you all did as well. As we wrap up here, I just want to remind everyone that we do have a couple more future events. So if you enjoyed tonight, please consider registering for the next two coming up in the mid-December. Also, we will be sending out that email with some wrap-up information for you about the future events, as well as Park Advocacy Day, and contact information for our panelists, which they've already made available today during the presentation. But if you have specific questions, you'll be able to connect with them directly. Also, I will say, if anyone has any questions we did not answer, the PTNY team is going to try to loop back and get your questions answered. Also, if you are a participant and you want to connect with another participant, either you saw something similar in the chat or you had a question, feel free to email PTNY, and then we will connect you with that participant as well. So we know that friends say regularly that networking and connecting and learning from each other is your favorite parts of our events. And so we want to try to foster that as best we can. So feel free to take us up on that offer. And of course, follow us on our social media. Definitely, if you are not a member of our Facebook group for friends groups, check that out. There's a nice conversation going there, and you can kind of learn from each other and pose questions. And I think it's a nice forum. So with all of that, thank you very much for participating tonight. I appreciate it very much to our panelists and the PTNY team, and try to enjoy the slightly warmer weather this weekend. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I know PTNY is, we're staying on, so Haley's doing the perpetual wave. Yes, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. And thank you, Haley and Erica, for recording. I appreciate it. I think it is a good amount of time. I think it'd be great for our YouTube channel, like we discussed. I know someone mentioned that earlier, which was nice. Hey, Robin. Oh, she can't. I mean, sorry, you're muted. Oh no.
I'm trying.
Okay, hi.
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 Ron's iPhone. I'm gonna remove you. That's okay. I'll give you one more minute before I do the big goodbye.
Thank
Okay.
you for coming, Ron.
Bye. Sorry, Ron.
Bye, Ron.
Bye, Ron.
See ya.
So.
Well, that was great.
That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody
great.
stayed on time because it was so tight. I feel like it could maybe be like an hour and 15 minutes or something. Yeah, just so,
Mhm.
not to feel so anxious about.
Right.
we were commenting earlier that we thought folks might stick around if they kind of felt like it was coming to an end and the questions were worthwhile, which is why I teased out two
That
more.
was great.
Yes,
Stay with it.
Mhm.
This is the topic. So
That was a good call. I like